This week on the Wyndham Community Podcast, it's all about the upcoming state election. If you live in the Point Cook electorate and you're wondering why a local GP would be running for state government, we might be able to help you understand with a detailed interview with independent candidate for Point Cook, Dr Joe Garra. Welcome to the Wyndham Community Podcast with Shannon Maguire, a local resident of Wyndham with a passion for the community and improving our connections. The show aims to provide a balanced and safe platform to keep you informed about what's happening in your community and promote engagement locally. I hope this show can help you learn new things and inspire you with ideas from locals and people that care deeply about our area. Every episode we aim to give an in-depth analysis on local issues affecting us all, events and investigation of people within our community with interesting stories, responsibilities or opinions. As I say every episode, there's a whole section in bookstores on self-help, but there's no section for helping others. This show is not only about your views, but how we can help each other. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are recording today, the Boonwurrung and Wadawurrung people. I pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening today. As the state election is fast approaching, on Saturday the 26th of November 2022, we reached out to key candidates for electorates within the Wyndham City area. Dr Joe Garra agreed to come on the show and tell us why he's running for the Point Cook electorate, along with what he believes are the key issues for the area. For those of you new to the show, I'd like to invite you to our local Facebook group called Wyndham Community Podcast, where you can connect and discuss local issues and events with like-minded individuals. It is a safe space for questions of leaders in our community and engaged citizens. But more so, it's a space to engage with others to arrange meetups and opportunities for all. There's a link to in our show notes on how to join, or please contact myself, Shannon Maguire, on Facebook for an invitation. But before we start, every episode I would like to make you a little more knowledgeable about our area. A quick fact about Wyndham is that we have a sister city called Costa Mesa in California, USA. It is just south of Disneyland. Considering we're talking about politics, it's an interesting fact that although as a city we've traditionally been a safe seat, Costa Mesa is traditionally split down party lines, which quite literally are 32.1% of voters registered for both of their major parties. And with that, up next is an interview with Dr Joe Garra. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Dr Joe Garra, independent candidate for Point Cook in the upcoming state elections. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for the invite, Shannon.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and why you put your name forward to represent the electorate.
Okay, well, I'm born and bred Westie. I grew up in North Altona for the first half of my life, and second half I've been in Werribee, and the last 15 years in Werribee South. And I suppose my interest really got heightened back in 2017 with the protest about the proposed youth detention centre in East Werribee, which was part of Werribee South. And at that time, I was the chair of the Werribee South Ratepayers Association. So I thought, well, it's my duty to stick up for our members and get involved in the protest. And that's when I realised that because we were a safe ALP area, ALP didn't really care what happened to this side of town. And the Liberal Party, the opposition, realised that they were multiple elections away from ever having a chance of winning a seat at this side of town, so they ignored us as well. I thought, well, I'm just tired of and frustrated with the lack of services, infrastructure, schools. There's so many problems on the western side of town, and that's been my main catalyst. I thought, well, rather than just sit back and complain about it, get involved and try and make a change. And last time I stood for Werribee, but Werribee South has now been redistributed into the new seat of Point Cook. Mm-hmm. And I've been always very vocal to say the local representative should live in the seat. Because I say, unless you actually live and breathe the seat, 7 days a week, you don't really understand what's happening. When you come in and just work for a few hours during the day, well, you don't really get a picture of how hard it is to actually travel around the suburb, because if you're coming to work to Werribee, you're actually going against the traffic, and you're going home against the traffic, so you think it's all wonderful. And you haven't got issues with your kids going to school and how to get the kids to school, and the schools are all crowded. So you only get hearing what people tell you, not actually living it. So I believe that the local MP should be living the electorate.
Yep. And have been for a while by the sounds of it.
Yeah, well, I've been in Werribee 30 years now, and the last 15 in Werribee South. And as a local GP since 1988, I have the amazing opportunity of seeing multiple people a day, all walks of life, all nationalities, and you learn so much about them and the community just by talking to them. And they've all got their stories, they've all got issues they're having, so you learn quite a lot about the community in my role, and it's a real privilege. And it's I've learned so much from patients about the issues they have living in this area.
All right, I'll move on to the next question. So I asked my 15-year-old son which questions I should ask the candidates, and I think his response was perfect. He wanted to know how you make decisions, specifically how you balance information provided to you from experts in areas such as health or the economy, and at times they may differ from views within the electorate that you serve. How would you go about doing that?
Okay, well, I've got a perfect example. Public transport in the area, it's a real problem, and the frequency of, say, buses every 20 minutes. So if you miss your bus, you're stuck for another 20 minutes. So you think, well, what's the point? I'll just get in my car and drive to the station, because it's, the station's only 5-10 minutes away by car. Now, Melbourne University have done this amazing study called Better Buses for the West. They've sort of done a redesign of bus routes, which they say after the initial expense is actually cost neutral, but it gets you buses every 10 minutes. So I'm thinking, well, they've got experts in the field looking at this matter. I mean, there's no problem me come up with an idea that, I've got to concede that the transport experts at Melbourne University will know a lot more about bus movements than I do. So I thought, well, that's a great idea, and get behind it. So, to answer the question, for all different issues, you look around it, get all the information you can and go, okay, which one makes the most sense, which is the most logical? What are the experts telling us? It's not someone's pet project, it's actually the experts. And, for example, major projects should all go through either Infrastructure Victoria or Infrastructure Australia to determine the, suitability of those projects. So we're not just wasting money on a project with little benefit. That's how I would go about it.
Yep. So further to the last question, let's say that there was a new COVID-19 strain which was twice as deadly as the previous ones, and there was a clear health recommendation to return to lockdowns. How would you balance this advice with the community expectations and impact on the economy and mental health of people? Obviously, you probably have a unique expertise in that yourself, but...
Yeah, look, I've basically lived COVID the last 3 years, right? And look, I've been a major proponent of vaccination, because that's actually saved lives, because there's definite proof that if you're vaccinated, you get less unwell. So, again, you'd have hopefully a newer vaccine that's better for the newer strains, is developed quickly. You'd encourage that. As for lockdowns, we've got to look at what we've learnt with what we've done. And I think we know that surface spread is minimal, so we forget about wiping down power poles and stuff outside, in the outside world. That's silly. We also know there's very little evidence of outdoor spread. Most spread is inside buildings or at home or at work. And also the evidence is now emerging from around the world that schools are not a main driver of transmission. The number of kids catching COVID mirrors what's in the community. It's not higher in kids going to school compared to kids who aren't going to school. So, if you do lock down, you may have to lock down. You may have to stop people going to their workplace, so you work from home. But you would allow what can be done safely to continue to be done safely. For example, schools. You say, right, we know schools are safe. Kids might have to wear masks. You might have to have windows open. Make sure the vaccines are up to date. And that's the best environment for kids to learn. When kids have lost a lot of, teenagers have lost 2 years of their schooling, which they're going to get back. They've now finished school and they're out in the workforce or at uni, and they've got this huge gap, and they've lost major skills in how to communicate with people. I mean, they've spent 2 years communicating by screens and phones, and it's not quite the same. Kids' sport is great for mental health. So, even if you got a deadly rush, okay, kids, this is how you're going to play your sport. You get dressed in your uniform at home. Your parent drives you to the oval or the basketball court, drops you off. They can't stay and watch. They come back later and pick you up. You don't have change rooms. You just have toilets to use. And kids can play their sport safely, and it's great for the mind, great for the body. So we have to, use the lessons we've learned. 3 years ago, we didn't know much about what was right, what was wrong to do, but we now have lots and lots of evidence about what does work and what doesn't work. So we've got to follow the science. People always say follow the science, but then you don't actually get to see the science. But it's emerging now that lots of things we did, we probably didn't have to do. Now, with the experts thought it was the right thing, but at the time, many of us were actually querying it, saying, it doesn't really make sense. How's two kids playing footy going to give each other COVID? It's not going to happen. There was that stupid example of South Australia where the husbands have said, if the ball's coming into the crowd, don't touch it. Like, really? You're not going to catch COVID off a footy. If there's live virus on the footy, you've got to touch that bit of live virus and put it straight up your nostril, because otherwise you'll be putting your hand somewhere else, wiping it off. So, there's a lot of silly stuff said over the last 2 years. So, you might have to stop people going out and about, and that's fair enough, going into work, and that's where they're going to catch it. They can also catch it at home. So, we never want to see what happened, a few years ago where they locked, and it was mainly working class migrants, where they just locked them in their towers at no notice. And basically that was, it's okay if you guys all catch COVID as long as you don't give it to us. And that was a shocking response for those poor people. It should never happen again, that type of response. But, just got to follow the science, be careful, and learn the lessons of the last 3 years now.
Yep. Well, that kind of ties in very well to the next question. So Wyndham had a disproportionately large impact from COVID on its residents and health and economic outcomes, and limited targeted supports in place. What would you have done? You have kind of spoken to this a bit, but what would you have done differently, and what would you do differently in the future to support, I guess, our unique demographic situation?
Look, I think this is where I'm really proud of Wyndham Council. We were probably the first area where, once it became obvious who was being affected, Wyndham Council reached out to the community leaders that they knew in their different communities and said, okay, guys, this is what we need to do. And once the vaccine came out, they were excellent. Like, we approached them about setting up a vaccine hub to, duplicate the efforts of what was happening at Eagle Stadium, and that worked really well. And we had specific days. We had one specific day for the Islanders to all come along and be vaccinated, and we made sure everything was culture appropriate. They had women-only vaccine centres, the council at a mosque. So you just got to have targeted messaging. And I always said our whole COVID messaging by the government was those very long press conferences, usually on a Sunday. I'm thinking, well, who's watching those? It's the upper middle class sitting at home. Like, the poor migrant woman with 4 kids is too busy wrangling 4 kids and getting food organised while hubby's out there working, doing his, packing the food to deliver to people in the safety of their own homes. So we've got to look at more protecting a lot of those essential workers. For example, abattoirs, we should have been in a lot earlier and saying, okay, we need this abattoir going, but you all have to wear full PPE. And modify, okay, guys, sorry, we're going to have staggered lunch breaks, like work out how not to have them all crowded in together. So you've got to give more support but unfortunately, it's often migrant workers who are doing the essential work that we need to keep going so everyone else is fed. So we've got to make sure that they're safe. Our whole, I've said before, our whole messaging was very white, I called it, and that has to change. Just having a press conference at 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning on all the mainstream media doesn't get into the migrant communities. A lot of them don't understand English that well. They may not be good with computers, and So you've got to change your messaging. You've got to get it out into the communities, and you've got to use your community leaders. And a lot of the migrant groups are still very faith-based, so they've got local churches and they respect their church leaders. So they should be used a lot more to get the message out to people.
In order for this community to flourish, please subscribe to the show on your platform of choice for regular updates on issues and events that affect you. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Android-based podcast apps. Just search for Wyndham Community Podcast. We also have a Facebook page called Wyndham Community Podcast. Please join and be as active as you would like there, and talk to your friends and family to also join in on this social experiment. A lot of shows ask you to rate them on Apple Podcasts or your platform of choice, and we would love you to do this. But what's much more important for us is considering that we are a local podcast to Wyndham and only really focus on the people of Wyndham and the surrounding suburbs, is if you want to support the show, please tell a friend or family member in the area to get involved and to share our show with them and others in the community. And with that, let's get on with the show. So, next question. What are the three main things that you would work towards achieving if you were successful in representing your electorate?
Three. Okay, well, can I pick three that shattered? Okay. Okay. Number one's health. That's the big one for our area. I mean, we do have a hospital in the area, but less than 40% of people who require to be an inpatient can actually get that care at Werribee Mercy. So over 60% of people who need to be admitted to hospital have to go outside the suburb, and that's not right. I mean, and look, you'll never get 100% because there are certain procedures that are done, for example, brain surgery, which won't never be done at Werribee. But, you've got pregnant women travelling to Sunshine because the maternity ward isn't big enough at Werribee. You've got people injuring their hands who can't get, plastic surgery done. We haven't got a plastic surgeon at Werribee, have to go elsewhere. Look, I've got a little quote where I say, you shouldn't drive past a public hospital to get the same level of care at another public hospital, if that makes sense. You can get a higher level of care, which means that service can't be provided, but if it's not being provided at your local because of capacity, that's wrong. You've got to get the capacity right. And look, you should be able to treat at least 70 or 80% of the population at your local hospital. There's only the really, super specialised stuff that you can't expect to be done locally. So that mental health, on the health issue, mental health, there is no public outpatient psychiatry we can refer to. So at the moment, as a GP, if you've got depression, I can treat you. I can refer you to a psychologist to help. If you deteriorate and you can't afford to pay to see a private psychiatrist, and that's usually weeks or months away, there's no other option. I've got to keep doing my best until you're sick enough to require an admission to the mental health unit at Werribee. There's no one to access at the mental health unit to see you as an outpatient. They'll only see you if you're acutely unwell and need to be admitted or close to that. So there's a big gap in care that we don't have here. And same with youth mental health. We don't have much youth mental health services in the area. And teenagers, it's a lot of them really struggled the last 2 or 3 years. And I hate doing it. I've had to put someone on antidepressants because the wait to see a psychiatrist was months away. And I thought, no, this kid needs help now. And we've got the psychology, but they're not getting better. They sadly need medication. So health's a big one. Look, just the way we move around the suburbs is huge too. I mean, we've already mentioned the bus networks, the trains. I mean, again, there's a little group called Rail Futures that have put together a proposal for a modification of Metro 2, where the tunnel from Fisherman's Bend would come out at Newport. Not Newport, would come out at Spotswood instead of Newport. And from Spotswood, there's already a train line to Sunshine, a freight line. And then you get the train out to Melton that way. And then you come the other way along the existing line from Spotswood to Werribee into Wyndham Vale. And that looks like a really good proposal. And it's one that the government needs to look at and go, oh, these guys have a clever idea. This might actually be better for the West than just Metro 2, and also gets people from Spotswood, you get to Sunshine and to the rail link. And look, you might have to change a couple of trains, but I think if trains are often enough, people don't mind. I mean, if you're hopping on and off trains, but it's a quick changeover, 5 minutes, or you'd be happy. That's fine. You're not going to be, if you miss a train, you don't want to be waiting 20 minutes for the next train. You think, get back in my car. So we've got to get cars off the road, because that's a major issue. And the other way, of course, of getting cars off the road is getting more local jobs, because, over 60% of people, again, leave Werribee just to go to work. And they think that's wrong. Why can't we? And they're going to often doing high-tech, IT work, or think, well, surely we could do that in Werribee. And that's where East Werribee comes in. We can really develop that in stages. It's going to be virtually impossible to get it developed all at once, because it's billions and billions of dollars. And but you could creep it in. You could add more, tertiary education along the Hoppers Lane side, and so invite more unis there. And you can get some high-tech, if you're going to make electric buses, you sort of say, hey, come and build electric buses here in Wyndham. You've got lots of people in Point Cook are, very, very smart. There's a high percentage of people with tertiary education in Point Cook, so they would love to work 5 minutes away. So, if you're working close to home, you've got more time. You've got more time for your family, more time for recreation. You don't get all grumpy driving to work every day. So, you've got to get local jobs. And the same with schools. We need to build schools at the same rate as houses. So all estates, when they get planned, have allocated land for schools. Well, the government should just buy the land as soon as houses start going up and build the school. So the school's ready when the kids are ready to go to school. What's happening at the moment is the estates get full of kids, and they have to go to the next nearest school, which often has to have portables put on, because that's the only way to get them into a school. While they think, we better build a school in that estate now. There's so many kids in need of school. Well, it was all predicted. I mean, an outer suburb is going to be home for young families with kids. It's not going to be home to the retirees. They're not going to buy a new home in Point Cook, or So a lot of that stuff's predictable, and I don't understand why governments don't just do it. And we shouldn't have to be pleading for a school, or there shouldn't be this big announcement. We're building a school for you. Aren't we good? Well, no, you have to build a school. It's like feeding your kids at home. We don't expect our kids to applaud every time they have dinner because we've fed them. It's something you just got to do. So just build a school. It's nothing to be proud of that you've had to build a school 5 years too late. And now we've got the average number of kids at Wyndham schools is almost double the average of Melbourne, which means you've got packed schools, and the more portals you put on a school site, the less green space you have. Then you're forced to, like some schools in Point Cook, to actually have staggered lunch breaks, so to fit all the kids out. So you think, well, that's not good. Part of being at school is interacting with your own mates, but interacting with, say, your siblings, friends who might be older or younger. So you learn how to integrate, socialise with kids of all ages at a school. If you've got staggered lunch breaks, all you're going to do is socialise with your own classmates, and that's not healthy. It's not a good way to be. It's a waste of being at school. School isn't just about learning. It's also about learning social skills. So having huge schools doesn't actually help that. And again, by having a school closer, you get kids off the road. They can walk or cycle to school rather than getting lifts from their parents. I mean, all kids should be able to have a public school, within walking or cycling distance from their home.
I think you've come up with 4, but I'll let you get away with that. I'll have to let others get away with it as well if they come up with 4, but that's okay.
Yeah, I didn't mention integrity, but I'll just mention it as one word.
There you go. Yeah, fair enough. So the City of Wyndham's known for 2 areas of serious infrastructure issues. We're the worst LGA in Australia for green canopy, and we're also the worst for accessing swimming infrastructure, with just 2 pools covering about 300,000 people. What can you do to invest in these areas?
Well, the first we say was swimming infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Point Cook, there's a proposal by Hobson's Bay to build an aquatic centre in Altona Meadows, and it's in Bruce Common Reserve, which is next door to Point Cook, basically. So for $60 million, they're happy to put in 20. They want 20 from the state, 20 from the federal. So that's something that, easily fight for that. That's just a no-brainer. I mean, an aquatic centre can be used by so many people. So they just got to do it. Again, it's one of those things that it's just got to happen. So Now, the green canopy, a lot of their states don't have much trees. I mean, it's part of the factor that newer states often don't have trees. It takes a long time for trees to grow because, the landscape gets flattened. What we should be also doing is developing the park. Again, all estates have land set aside for green space. That should also be like the school. Start developing it. As soon as you know you're going to start selling houses, start getting the trees planted, the playground up, and get all that stuff. It's only going to be a year or two before it gets used. Just get it started. East Werribee, again, you've got this huge parcel of land there, and it's flood prone, so there has to be a lake developed there to help keep the land usable. So again, there's an opportunity to have this wonderful space. You've got to have a man-made lake, and you can plant trees, have great opportunity to have, sporting fields and so much stuff at East Werribee if done properly.
Okay. Last question. When running for local election myself a couple of years ago, many state issues were raised by residents as major impacts on their lives. Most importantly, these were the infrastructure investment, in particular train stations, major road upgrades. We need these quicker than the current proposed government. At the moment, they're looking at, you've spoken about some potential options there, but at the moment, there's a proposal for a 4-year wait for the David Rose Road train station and just a setting up of a plan for one in Truganina. So that's one issue. And then the second most complained issue outside of infrastructure was the town planning system. So currently allows for smaller blocks, no real infrastructure investment, but also there's no clear downtown in a lot of the new suburbs like Tarneit North, Tarneit West, Truganina, Williams Landing. What would you do, I guess, to address those two issues, either now or retrospectively and into the future?
Yeah, well, again, we've got to look. There is a fund called the Growth Infrastructure Fund that all developed of new areas have to contribute a levy into. And currently, as of now, there's been over $200 million contributed by developers into that levy. Only $100 million has been spent in Wyndham. So the government is, according to the books, it may not have the money there, but is actually sitting on over $100 million of money that should be used in the new infrastructure suburbs. So that should just spend the money. What are you waiting for? It's actually money the fund was designed to allow spending to happen in these new states as needed, but it's not being spent. So that money can be released. That's automatically some money there. I mean, the road infrastructure, for example, Litchfield Point Cook or Port Cook Road, and there's lots of land where it can be duplicated. So where there's space, just duplicate it. It's going to have to be done eventually. Just do it now. What are we waiting for? It's important to duplicate that, and then you can all sorts of different things with the double lane Point Cook Road. You can have bus only lanes at peak time, so it gets your buses moving quickly. So people go, oh, I'll catch the bus. It's much quicker than driving, which is all helps the environment. There's so much stuff that can be done if you just think ahead, and that's the problem. We often, as I said, the whole area is 5 to 10 years behind where it should be all the time. Everything that's promised is always patching over cracks. We're never going, hang on, let's just do all this now. So it just requires massive investment in the area. And we're not asking for overs, we're just asking for an equal share of the investment. I don't think any of the requests that a lot of the residents have are unreasonable. They're all saying, why haven't we got a good road here? I don't know why you haven't. There should be a good road there. So we're not asking for gold paved streets. We're just asking for proper infrastructure. And so what can I do about it? I'd be just, look, I get pretty passionate and fired up. So that's me. That's what you would get. And that's what I start to say to people. Look, if you're voting for me, you're actually voting for yourselves, because not being aligned to a party, as long as what people want is reasonable and makes sense and it's logical and there's evidence behind it, well, I fight for it. It's not going to be my pet project. It's going to be the community's projects. So that's the advantage of independent, is we could just really fight for the people and bring up what they want. One classic example is the ALP have promised to put traffic lights at Central Avenue and Point Cook Road and duplicate a bit of Central Avenue, and they're calling it an upgrade to Point Cook Road. Well, it's not really, and I haven't actually found anyone council had no idea that was going to happen, Hobson's Bay. So I think, well, how they come up with this project? Is this their idea of how to do something that looks nice, but haven't actually discussed with anyone? And the classic was both level crossing removal in Werribee, Hoppers and Werribee. had consultation sessions, but it became painful obvious to those that they were just a tick-the-box exercise, because someone asked them, what if we hate this plan? And the guy said, there's not much we can do about it. Well, why are you coming and having this meeting for then? Could have just sent us a letter saying this is what's happening. They come, make us all come out and talk to you about what we think is wrong with the plan. A lot of that happens which shouldn't be happening. I mean, local councils, they do heaps of work about what the areas need. But they know where the schools should be, where the roads need to be improved. So, we've got all the work done there. Just use it. Don't just pick projects because you think it's a good idea.
So is there anything else you'd like to add in relation to your candidacy, and I guess also ways that people can contact you to find out more?
Yeah, well, there's lots of ways. The easiest way to get the initial contact, when we don't update it very much, is the website, which is just joegarra.com.au. But that gives you links to my Twitter account, to Facebook. It's got a phone number there, which is a campaign phone number. It's got an email address, which again is just joegarra@joegarra.com.au. There's lots of ways. And of course, I'll be at pre-polling every single day, every hour for the next 2 weeks at the Poncook Town Centre. So happy for people to just stop me and ask some questions while I'm handing out the vote cards.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, and good luck with the rest of the campaign.
Thank you, Shannon. Thanks so much for the invites.
We want your ideas and feedback on the show itself, and what we can do to support you in your local area. Have you got a story that you would like us to cover, or an issue that we have not covered yet? Or even a guest that would be amazing for us to meet? Please contact us on Facebook, email at wyndhamcommunity@gmail.com, or call me, Shannon, on 0408 308 451. If you do like the show, in order for others to find us, please rate us on your platform of choice, including Apple Podcasts. If you do rate us on Apple Podcasts, we will read out the rating and comments live on the next show. So with that, I wish you all the best and hope this show has given you information, food for thought, or connection now or into the future with somebody. Look after yourself, and if you can, somebody else in your community.